Are you aware that there are soil issues that are semi-unique to Colorado that it's worth being aware of? And I'm going to talk about that today as far as structural issues that's worth being aware of, not as a fear tactic, but just going in eyes wide open every transaction, which is my goal explicitly as a realtor, and advocating for my clients to make sure they understand all the information possible so they go in eyes wide open and have a full understanding of what they're getting into, whether there are issues, whether there are no apparent issues. And that's what we're going to cover today, are potential structural issues in buying a property in Colorado. Let's go. I connect with people just like you every day to help them discover where to live and invest in real estate and sell property for top dollar when the time is just right for them. My name is Leif Jacobson. I'm an ex-cop turned realtor, also known as Safe Leif. If you're new to this channel, subscribe so you're first to learn about Colorado real estate and especially about issues like we're talking about today. My contact information is below. I'm really excited to hear from you. Reach out by text, call, or email after this video, or you can book a calendar event and I'll come after you that way. Whatever works best for you, whatever's smoothest as far as communication, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, today, and I want to issue one qualification, of course, that I need to, is that I'm not an engineer of any kind. I'm not a structural engineer or any kind of design engineer. So I'm speaking as a realtor who's well-read and well-versed on issues like this in general and have exposure to structural and other engineering issues, but I'm not speaking as an engineer or pretending to be. So I'm staying in my lane, but helping you understand some general cautions and information reference structural issues that can be caused by soil-specific issues that are kind of semi-unique to Colorado. The most common geologic hazard in Colorado is expansive or swelling soil. And basically that is due to levels of clay that are kind of laced into the soil, because clay is greatly affected by moisture and water, which causes it to expand and contract, especially with hot and cold temperatures, not just the water and the moisture itself, but with hot and cold temperatures. I mean, I've seen Colorado vary 70 degrees in one day, as far as like 90 degrees, gorgeous summer day, and then 20 degrees at night. So we can have massively fluctuating amounts of moisture, which we'll talk about, and also hugely fluctuating temperatures, which causes freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw. There's, if you spend any time driving around Colorado, there's cracks and spaces in the roadways and the asphalt everywhere. That's primarily because of those fluctuations in temperature as well as moisture that helps cause those issues. These clays and expansive soil and contracting soil causes more property damage than anything that I'm aware of in all the state of Colorado. So this can mean a 20% expansion contraction percentage, which is a huge percentage when you're talking about soil and structures that are built on that soil. And that translates into forces that are capable of moving soil, sitting on the soil or mounted on the soil to the tune of 30,000 pounds per square foot, which is more than enough to break up any, certainly any wood or lumber or building materials in general, but even concrete. Expansive soils is a prevailing cause of damage to buildings and construction, hands down, in Colorado, and translates into losses in the billions of dollars per year, which translates into structural damage in general for structures like we've talked about, but also flat work like concrete work such as driveways, patios, foundations, floors, and basement floors that are slab concrete can have huge issues, and expansion, contraction, heaving, breaking up, separating here and there. So that's definitely things that we need to be watching for. And it also causes issues for things that are buried down in the soil, such as pipelines and utilities that can have issues as well. Colorado Springs is especially vulnerable to this because it's literally right at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, Pikes Peak being one of the first mountains that comes up out of Colorado Springs. So that's an exceptional issue because of Colorado Springs' location to the base of the mountains right there. Homes can be built successfully and safely on expansive soils, but they need to be constructed a little differently in order to last and sustain with those soils. So that's something I'll let you look up and research yourself, but just so you know, hundreds of thousands of homes have been built here. So it's none of this is to fearmonger or scare anybody as far as building in Colorado. These are just things to be aware of because it's the reality of our soil here. The upward soil, expansion of soil that we talked about is generally in the engineering world is referred to as heaving soil, versus collapsing soil would be soil that's kind of sinking or settling downward. Next thing I'm going to talk about is 16 signs or symptoms that there may be a structural issue or an area of concern, but just because you see one of these, or me with an untrained eye, without somebody who knows what they're talking about and has an education looking at it, don't just see one of these and assume automatically that it's an issue. Don't make any assumptions. These are just things to go in eyes wide open and be aware of that may be issues as you take a look, and may be cause for additional investigation or having a more educated eye take a look at things. Number one is cracks in walls or ceilings. Now, I don't know that I've ever seen a house that doesn't have a single crack or imperfection as far as little hairline cracks in the walls or ceilings. But if you have many in many different areas, and especially in key locations, and they're sizable as well, a hairline crack is one thing, a crack that's, a half or 1 inch in width is another thing. So that's the first thing to be aware of. Number two is large cracks in the foundation or exterior walls. And especially, most foundations have cracks in them. For almost every house I've ever seen, there are some cracks. And again, hairline cracks are one thing. Larger cracks, the half inch in between are another thing. And you especially want to watch for horizontal cracks. So those are a greater cause for concern than vertical cracks in general. Heaving or leaning walls, obviously, those could be foundation walls, those could be retaining walls or landscaping, part of landscaping structure. So if they're leaning or heaving or leaning outward or inward or falling down, that's something to watch for as well. It's number three. Number four is uneven molding or trim. You can see shifting and distortion as far as trim, and that's one place to watch for. Number five, sagging, sloping, or uneven floors in the home. That's something to be watching for as well, and you can often feel those when you're walking. You can often see them if they're pretty egregious. Six is cracked tile or flooring, which is symptomatic of number five that we just talked about. When there are cracks, that means generally there's been some movement in that flooring. Number seven is cracks in exterior or interior walls, so either one. Number eight is large uneven cracks that run across the driveway, sidewalks, or garage, which again, vast majority of flat work has some imperfections, and that's why in a good concrete layer or a flat work person is going to create sections, and they're going to have grooves in the concrete because it's going to crack. Everybody knows that's going to happen, and so they're telling it where to crack. That's why they put those grooves in the concrete, is telling it and guiding where you want it to crack rather than just cracking across the whole thing. Number nine is cracks in foundations. We talked about that a little bit, but in general, long horizontal cracks, which can cause sloughing of the slab, or shifting or sloughing like this, versus everything being tied together vertically is not as much of a concern. Number 10 is a symptomatic thing, such as doors and windows that do not open and close properly. Number 11 is gaps around doors and windows. So around the same doors and windows that may or may not be functioning, watch for gaps that are opening up. Also, cracking as far as, tile and grout, even with caulk lines around windows, watch for that. Number 12 is cracked sheetrock, of course, and that's what we talked about first of all. You can watch for that cracking throughout a home, generally in the walls and the ceilings. Number 13 is misaligned trim or molding. Number 14 is moisture or water in the basement, and even signs of moisture or water. Even if you're not stepping into pools of water, watch for moisture or water stains. Number 15 is water leakage, which relates to the last one we talked about there. Watch for signs of water issues. Number 16 is leaning chimneys. So watch for things that are not straight, that should be straight, like chimneys, like other, venting, other things, architectural structure that should be pointing straight up and out, which if it's leaning a little bit, could be designed that way, but it's worth asking, hey, is that supposed to be leaning like that? People ask me all the time, clients mainly, if they should walk away from a structure that seems to have structural issues. And I strongly encourage having a structural engineer come and check it out. I have great relationships with engineers. I can connect you with engineers, and it's important to work with an engineer, just like a general building inspector, who doesn't sensationalize things. You want them aware and have good prowess in what they're doing, and great knowledge, of course, and a sharp, acute eye for watching for issues, but not make mountains out of molehills or blow things up. I've seen both, as far as people that are just kind of living out of fear or afraid of things, or they're afraid of liability, and so they can make a bigger issue out of something that may not be a big deal. So we're looking for a balance of those two, to advocate well for you and be sharp and watch for things, but not blow up things and make things a bigger deal really than they need to be. Basically, what we're looking for is ongoing movement. That's the main thing with movement of soil and expansive and contractive soils is, are they expanding and contracting more, and that's had happened recently? Is it an ongoing issue where they're causing damage? Or is this a past issue? I mean, it could be 37 years ago, that there was movement or crack in a foundation or a concrete or other structural issue, and it may be long, long ago. So that's different than you inspected it or took some photos of a house that you bought and you took them a year ago, and then you come back and there's a huge crack where there wasn't one a year ago. That's different. That indicates something that's much more recent, that there's ongoing movement, which is a much greater concern than movement in past many years or decades that has since settled and may be rock solid. And of course, this all comes down to going in eyes wide open on transactions. With me advocating for clients, I want you to go in knowing as much information as possible so you can make the best decision for yourself and with your own budget and with your own priorities and your goals in your life. Keeping things in perspective, you can have issues with even a foundation. That's the main concern with most people. But it is all relative to your threshold and your level of perceived risk. If you're going in and getting a property for a good enough deal, it might be worth purchasing it. And you're going in eyes wide open. You've had it assessed and an engineer check things out. If you're getting a $600,000 house for $300,000, which will likely cost $100,000 to fix the foundation, well, you're talking about significant equity here as far as making those repairs. No sweat. Just because it has even major structural issues doesn't necessarily mean that you should walk away. It depends on your resources and your willingness to shoulder some risk there in taking care of issues. Just like we always say, almost anything's for sale. It depends on the price. Anything's fixable. It just depends on how much it's going to cost. So it's my job to help advocate for you, ask the right questions, get the right professionals present in order to give you the data that you need to make the right decision. One thing I definitely do not recommend is sticking your head in the sand and just pretending that you didn't see something or hoping that something isn't going to be an issue. Don't try to skimp and save on a few $100s for what could be a massive issue and a huge concern to the tune of thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because you didn't want to spend $350 or whatever it is to have the engineer come out and take a look. Generally, that's money well spent. I can help you weigh other pros and cons and other issues to help you understand whether it's appropriate to spend the money. And general building inspectors, while they're great at what they do as far as being general building inspectors, they will also tell you they're not a structural engineer. That's not their specialty. If they see things that are indicative of possibly a major or more prominent issue, they're going to be the first to say, I recommend that you have a structural engineer come check that out. So again, don't rely on a building inspector. While he's good at general building inspections, he's not an engineer and doesn't necessarily know all the components of structural engineering. Clients often ask me if there's anything can be done to avoid these issues in the first place, as far as them happening to your property, but also mitigating issues that are already a concern for property. And the answer is generally yes. I've never met an engineer, I don't think, that assessed a property that didn't have ideas and kind of thinking outside the box ways in order to mitigate and or avoid issues into the future. Lot grading issues are often a common occurrence as far as causing issues structurally and with residential and commercial properties. So lot grading is a big deal, and that has a lot to do with drainage and a lot to do with water, as we said up front, which is one of the most powerful forces in the world that I'm aware of is hydropressure and water pressure. So guiding where that water goes, mitigating where the water goes and where it's collected and where it drains off to or where it does not. So really, really good drainage is the most common thing I hear of as far as a mitigation issue. If you have masterful drainage, you're way less likely to have issues structurally on a property. Part of that water mitigation plan is gutter. They're also for keeping water away from the foundation of that structure. That's the primary goal of a gutter, is to guide water out and away from the structure, to collect it, of course, and then guide it out and away from the structure. So make sure you clean your gutters on an annual basis at minimum, depending on how much overhang or foliage or other things that you have that might be blocking those. It pays to have super clean gutters so that water's going where it should and not be sitting where it shouldn't. Make sure gardens and garden beds and landscaping are pulled out from the house as well. And you want, negative grading outside from the house. You don't want the dirt, leaning in or grading into the foundation. You want that leaning outward and outside. And you don't want garden beds that are right up against the foundation or too close to the house. You want to have those out from the house. Because again, the entire point is guiding water away from that foundation. If you're buying raw land, which is something that I specialize in as well, not all realtors know the ins and outs of raw land and the risks and issues that go with that. There's a ton of risk when you're buying raw land that's not been proved or built on yet. You don't know what's going to happen when you dig into that soil. Nobody does. So you can do soil tests that will help you understand some of these issues as well, as far as perk tests and permeability tests as far as the soil that tell you whether it's a good spot to build in or not so much. So hopefully this has provided valuable information for you as far as things to watch for, things to be aware of, and not also sensationalize or live out of fear. It's not about that. It's about just being fully aware, getting good data and good information so you can make the best decisions for yourself in buying or selling real estate. Let me know if there's 10 other things you're thinking of that I could have covered in this video. Again, if you're an engineer, don't pick me apart too hard. I'm just a realtor trying to help people be aware in general of issues, but I'd love to learn and grow myself. So thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'm excited to connect with you next time. Reach out by text, call, or email after the video, and I'll see you on the next one.